Welcome to live stream from Deloitte House at Davos 2019. Deloitte, we're very, very proud of all of our work around the fourth industrial revolution and preparedness for that, both with our clients, our own people, and the societies in which we live. So I'm really, really delighted today to welcome you to an event that we're hosting on behalf of a charity, which I chair, the Educational Employers, and the OECD, who are launching a report today. My name's David Cruickshank. I chair Deloitte globally, and I will introduce the remainder of our speakers as they come up to the stage later on. But firstly, a few words about the report that's being issued today. It's by the OECD, supported by Educational Employers, and really looks at the workplace of the future. What's required, what skills are there, what engagement do employers need to have in schools, what engagements do schools need to have with employers to make sure that our pupils, our students, are ready for the workplace of the fourth industrial revolution. And we've got some provoking thoughts and a great panel, but I'm going to stop now and introduce a brief video we have, which explains the background to some of the work in the OECD report, and then I'm going to invite Andreas Schleicher, who is the head of education at the OECD, to come and introduce the report and take you through the main details. So cue the video.
What you're looking at are not just children's drawings, they're children's dreams. In 2017, Education and Employers, a UK-based charity, asked some 20,000 primary school pupils in the United Kingdom and in 19 other countries to draw what they want to be when they grow up. These pictures of sports stars and doctors, teachers and veterinarians show you that kids as young as 7 already have big plans for themselves. But some children are setting limits to their own ambitions. A study of these drawings and the backgrounds of the children who drew them finds that children from wealthier families tend to see themselves working in higher-paying professions. For example, the most popular job choices among girls from more advantaged families are architect, engineer, and vet. But among girls from more deprived families, the favorite choices are hairdresser, nurse, sales assistant, and beauty therapist. These differences in aspirations don't disappear as children grow up. The OECD Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, finds that advantaged 15-year-old students are significantly more likely than their disadvantaged peers to expect to work in high-status careers. The founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund in the United States, Marian Wright Edelman, said it best: "You can't be what you can't see." When it comes to imagining their own future, children look to the adults around them for inspiration. Children from disadvantaged families often have a limited view of the world of work. Because of that, they may not push themselves to study hard at school, which only adds to their disadvantage. Boys and girls, rich and poor, need to see the many kinds of work that men and women do. They need to meet people who do jobs they can't even imagine. PISA finds that while most 15-year-olds already have a good idea about the kind of career they want to pursue, their choices have little in common with the reality of the job market. So how can children, no matter where they live, no matter what their background, get to learn about all of these jobs? There's a simple way. Volunteers from the world of work can visit primary school classrooms and talk to pupils about the work they do and how they learn to do it. Some schools have already opened their doors to local doctors and firefighters and engineers, to the benefit of both the children and the adults involved. And technology now makes it possible to connect these volunteers with schools so kids can learn about work from lawyers and artists and electricians living in communities that may be far from their own. Think of it as a kind of show and tell. It may be child's play, but it can help fire kids' imagination and ambition. It can get them thinking about how the things they learn in school are related to the jobs they might do later on. And it can help them understand what it really takes to turn their dreams into reality. Many of us have taken our daughters and sons to work. It's now time to take our work to school.
Okay, and for the benefit of those on the live stream, we actually have a very full group of people here today. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming and spending the time with us this afternoon. I think the schedule, we plan to finish around 1:30. We have Andrea speak, we'll have a small panel, but we will have time for you to ask questions as well. Just with the logistics of the live stream, we're going to pass around cards for you to scribble out your questions, and then I can sort of moderate them and make sure that we cover all the main issues that you'd like to raise as we're going through. So without further ado, Andreas Schleicher, Head of Education at the OECD, and I think the leading thinker on education and what works around the world. Andreas.
Thank you, David. And first of all, I really want to thank you for hosting us so generously. I always have been impressed, despite your most incredibly busy job, you've always put education and social progress first. And I think we need business leaders like you who push education to educate our children for their future, not for our past. I think there's a lot of work being needed from all of this. Just get mine. And that brings me to the start. Education is an incredibly conservative social enterprise, if we think about it. As parents, we get nervous when our children no longer learn things that we used to learn in school. And sometimes we get even more anxious when they learn things that we don't understand. Teachers are more likely to teach how they were taught than how they were taught to teach. And as a politician, you can lose an election over education. But you rarely win one over education, because it just takes a long time to get good ideas translated into better practice. And that's the kind of dilemma in which we work. But that also, I don't know why my clicker doesn't work. The world is changing really fast, and as the video just showed you, Nick Chambers and his charity Education Employers asked 20,000 children to draw their dreams of their future. And it's just amazing what children see in their own future. We can all learn a lot from this, and actually it was Nick's work that has inspired us at the OECD to look at the future a lot more carefully. Now, I know some of you will tell me, well, how can you talk about the future when we can't even figure out what's going to happen tomorrow? But actually, there is a lot that we know about the global mega trends that shape education and the fourth industrial revolution, more than we think. And if we think about how those different changes impact education in the future, we're going to be much better in preparing ourselves for the challenges than being sort of ambushed by them. And also, education is always the key to shaping the global mega trends. Now, economies everywhere are becoming regional hubs that are linked by global chains of knowledge and capital and information and goods. And they're always concentrated where comparative advantage can be built and renewed. And that is ultimately linked to the distribution of human potential and wealth. And that, again, is determined by educational opportunities. It's always our skills, the right skills, that are going to empower people and economies and society. So let's have a look at some of those trends. Now, if you look at the screen there, within the next 10 years, the majority of the world population will consist of the middle class. And China and India alone are making up 9 out of 10 entrants to the middle class. And of course, it's not just growing share, it's also rapidly rising absolute numbers. Think about the pressures that's going to create to provide a lot more and better education by a lot more demanding customers. But not everybody has benefited equally. Income and wealth have also become a lot more concentrated. In the OECD countries, the richest 10% now earn almost 10 times what the poorest 10% earn. And again, that ends up on the doorsteps of schools. Growing social disparities are already now the biggest single challenge for teachers. And again, they drive inequality and opportunity, and that results in political and social issues. We're also seeing a lot more people on the move. And in the rich world, we sometimes forget that most migration actually happens in the developing world. And we often don't realize that Asia has long replaced Europe, as you can see there, as the most popular region of destination. And again, migration is adding to diversity in classrooms, putting up huge challenges. How we can serve students from different cultural backgrounds better. What does it mean for teaching citizenship? How do we deal with issues around brain gain, brain drain, and so on? So don't be surprised that one of the most popular occupations is, moving elsewhere, flying into space. That's what wealthy children say. Or, going to other countries, becoming a pilot for the less wealthy children. There are also other pressures that add to volatility and uncertainty. Think about financial security, work-related security of people. On average, as you can see here, savings have declined and household debt has been rising. And depending on the affordability of debt and the accessibility of savings, now we all know how sudden changes in income or expenditure can actually put huge pressures on the system, or at scale bring us all into crisis. And again, it takes the right knowledge and skills for people to manage this. But when we tested financial literacy among 15-year-olds through our PISA assessment, we found that about a quarter of young people had virtually no clue of the kind of skills they need today. But let's get to the fourth industrial revolution directly. These days, digitalization is connecting people, cities, countries, continents in ways that vastly increase our individual but also our collective potential. As you can see, there are now more broadband connections in OECD countries than there are people. But digitalization has also made the world a lot more complex, more volatile, more uncertain. Digitalization can be incredibly democratizing. You can connect and collaborate with anyone you want. But it also concentrates incredible powers at a rate that we have never seen before. Sometimes squashing sort of individuality, creating scale without mass, leaving people out of the equation. Digitalization can be incredibly particularizing. The smallest voice is going to be heard everywhere, can be heard everywhere. But also it can be incredibly homogenizing, squashing identity, diversity. Digitalization is incredibly empowering. The most powerful companies these days start with a big idea, not with a big industry. They have the product before they have the money. But it can also be incredibly disempowering when you think about how we sometimes start to follow the dictates of some computer algorithm, even in our personal lives. About a decade ago, we got the world's knowledge at our fingertips. Soon after, the virtual world and the real world began to sort of merge, and then everybody got connected. But some of the things that used to be easy have actually become really complicated. And in the past, literacy was about extracting knowledge from pre-coded text. Everybody could learn that easily. And when you didn't know the answer to a question, you could look it up in an encyclopedia and you could trust the answer to be true. Today, you look up something on Google or Baidu or wherever, and you find 50,000 answers to your question, and nobody tells you what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is not true. Literacy is no longer about extracting knowledge. It's about constructing knowledge. Entirely different skill set. And while technology has connected all of us, it's the great part of it, we now tend to talk with people who think like us, talk like us, sometimes look like us. Algorithms behind social media are actually making it harder for people to experience diversity. They often homogenize opinions and polarize our societies. And so again, huge challenge for the future of education. In most countries, the majority of 15-year-olds in our PISA survey said they feel really bad if they're not connected. So you can see being connected is becoming like drinking water or breathing air now. And in some countries, you can see the time that 15-year-olds spend online on a regular school day has virtually doubled in just 3 years to an average of over 140 minutes. Now, the virtual world is becoming the real world. And look at how more dominant online reading has become over the last decade about news here. So the internet becomes sort of part of our lives. Now, many activities that used to involve physical contact are now being done online. It's like talking to friends, consulting a doctor, but the digital world is no second life. It's actually real life. It's increasingly part of our physical reality. Now, whether it's a job, room for the night, the love of your life, all of these things, virtual activity can translate into really very real kind of outcomes. So education needs to take advantage of those opportunities, the technologies of our time, but also address some of the issues around misuse. Think of cyberbullying, loss of privacy, illegal trade, and so on. It's not surprising, the drawings, computer program comes up a lot, and computer mechanics. So children actually see that world right in front of them. The dilemma for education is that the kind of things that are easy to teach and test are precisely the kind of things that are also easy to digitize. That is the real dilemma for those who have the right knowledge and skills. Actually, the fourth industrial revolution has been liberating and exciting, but for those who are not prepared, it can mean vulnerable and insecure work or life without prospects. Think about the role of technology in providing a marketplace for those demanding and supplying freelance work here. Online platforms such as Upwork and Freelancer have now 15 million users with a global reach. Every year, those kinds of platforms facilitate billions of dollars of transactions. The digital economy is the economy, and it changes the way we live and we work. People need to learn for that, to prepare for the increasing uncertainty of this economy. What are the consequences for online or on-the-job training if you don't have an employer? Lots of things get more complicated. How can education support students to develop the digital skills that are needed to create and produce content? See how this has risen between 2008 and 2007. Do our schools have the kind of technical partnership, the expertise it's going to take, the entrepreneurial expertise it creates to prepare for dynamic online marketplaces? Again, students can only learn for a future that they sort of can experience. It's a long way to go. When you look at some of the data in our test of adult skills, just about 1 in 10 55 to 65-year-olds have the digital skills that are needed in today's economies, not tomorrow, just today. Now you're going to tell me, well, that's just about older people not catching up with the development of technology. It's all going to be solved among the young generation. But even if you look at the young generation, 16 to 24-year-olds, you'll see that only every second person enters the workplace with the minimum ticket for the digital economy. Every second person you're going to meet outside the street isn't prepared for the world in which we live today. Differences in the pace of improvement are also quite striking. In the past, the US used to be at the frontier, now older generations well prepared. Among its young people, it's now close to the bottom. Not because things go worse, but because they got faster elsewhere. Singapore used to be the lowest performer and now is at the top. Not because, but again, even in Singapore, you can still see a third of young people being left out of the economy in which they live today. So no room for complacency. Some people call that a race between technology and education. Prior to the first industrial revolution, neither education nor technology made a huge difference for the majority of people. But then the industrial revolution put, technology ahead of people and caused huge amount of social pain. Fortunately, we invented public schooling in those days, moving education ahead of the technologies of our time, and that generated generations of prosperity. But again, now the digital world is changing the equation again, and we have people with degrees who cannot find a job, and at the same time employers say they cannot find the people with the skills they need. We need to think much, much harder. How do we move education once again ahead of the technologies of our time? Think about what the growth of artificial intelligence is going to do this over the years to come. These days, we need to think much harder about how human skills complement, not substitute, the artificial intelligence in our computers, so that we deliver or educate people who are first-class humans, not second-class robots. Again, education has won the race with technology throughout history. That's the great thing, but there is no automaticity. It's going to do that in the future. At the OECD, we spend a lot of time thinking about the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes and values that it's going to be taking to be successful in the future. Yeah, content knowledge is always important. You need to know something. But deep understanding, can you think like a scientist? It's more important than knowing lots of things of biology and chemistry. Can you think like a philosopher? Can you think like an historian? Do you understand how the narrative of society emerges, develops, advances, and sometimes unravels? And what does it mean for our lives today? Those skills are important. When we talk about the skill dimension, we often think about, things like creativity and critical thinking, cognitive skills. But actually, when you look at the fourth industrial revolution, what it does, it raises the value of social and emotional skills. Can you work with people who think differently than you? Can you connect your knowledge with the knowledge of other people? Innovation is happening at the boundaries of disciplines. People who can connect the dots where the next idea is going to come from. Those are the kind of dimensions we need to pay greater attention to. Attitudes and values. Success is not just about you knowing something, but you having a reliable compass and the navigation skills to find your way. If all we teach young people is what we know, they can step in our footpaths. But if you want them to walk anywhere, you have to give them those tools, those kind of compass. Today, the world no longer rewards us just for what we know. Google knows everything. It rewards us for what we can do with what we know. That's the big differentiator. We are not paying anywhere near the attention to this that is necessary. Our children seem ready for this. Inventor is a popular children's dream. That's great. So is robotics engineer. But think about how much room for real creative activity do we leave our children in our school. And contrast this with the views of teachers, about innovation in their schools. In our Thales survey, just a quarter of teachers said they would be recognized or rewarded for being more innovative in their teaching. 3 out of 4 teachers see their schools as a rather innovation-hostile environment. Think about that. It's also worth to look at some of the broader trends. It's never been easier to express your opinion, to reach out to your fellow citizens and so on as it is today. But key processes for democratic decision-making, here you can see voting, are on the decline. There are just a very few exceptions in the Nordic countries of Europe. And even if the digital world has expanded opportunities for people to use their voice, there's no guarantee they can access reliable information or have the willingness to listen to others or the willingness to compromise with others. So how can citizens sort fact from fiction? What kind of civic virtues do we need in the world of today? But interestingly, there are other forms of democracy emerging. Cities are increasingly collaborating to promote knowledge exchange and to ensure that national and international decision-making actually includes the increasingly important urban perspective. Look at the growth of city networks. So other forms of democracy emerge. And of course, we live longer. Now, the average retirement age in OECD countries hasn't changed that much, surprisingly, since the 70s. But longer life expectancy has raised the time that people spend in retirement from 13 years to about 20 years. Now, increased life expectancy is just one thing. The quality of those extra years is another story. Now, of the life expectancy gain that you can see here, 80% has been in good health, but the remaining 20% has been marked by poor health. Think about what this means for health and pension expenditure and the pressure that's going to create on public budgets and the resources will take away from the early years of people. People becoming older means they can work longer, and it's also something I could see, and you can combine longer lives with an ever more rapidly changing workplace, and that brings you to the toughest challenge that we face today. We used to learn to do the work. Now learning is the work. Longer working lives change skill demands, the increasing perspective for lifelong and life-wide learning. Should we make, lifelong learning compulsory? Those are going to be the question that we need to think hard about. What I can say clearly is that it isn't working now. Those who need education and training in adult life most are currently the ones who get the least out of it. As you can see here, participation in lifelong learning is very low for the poorly skilled, right across the board. And lifelong learning means we will need a lot more people who are teachers, who are coaches, who are designers, who are facilitators. And fortunately, it's also a really popular dream among our children today. But look at this. It's a very kind of traditional way of teaching that children see every day. And I'm so pleased we have Andria here with us, one of the great innovators in this field. But again, the image that children have of teaching is that, a very kind of traditional one. And actually, let me conclude with the dreams of children in a little bit more in greater detail. On the chart here, you see what the UK economy projects in terms of job needs for 2024. And that's sort of a perspective for today's primary schooling. And now contrast that with the dreams of 7 to 11-year-olds. And you can see dreams and realities don't match really well. No? Most children want to go into culture, into media, into sports, again, because that's what they see when they turn on the television. But the UK economy, as you can see also here, doesn't yet offer that much space in this field. Very few want to become, great economic leaders like you, David. No. The economy needs lots of them. There is a clear mismatch. Of course, the last thing we should be doing is leveling down the dreams of our children. But we should probably do a better job in telling children more about the world around them and about the trends that shape the fourth industrial revolution. If you think, well, these are just small children, you can do the same thing for an older age group here, 17 to 18 years, and you can see actually it's a little bit better match, but the gaps are still huge now. And for me, again, the most troubling finding from this survey is the myopic picture that children from deprived families have about their own future. They see this narrow range of occupations in their family. We could be doing so much better by bringing them closer to the world, by bringing the world of work into basically the education of children. Now, technology now allows us to give every child a real perspective of how the world of work is going to look like. And whether it's the job of parents or others, people can meet people. And if they can't do it in real, which is ideal, we can do that on the internet. So I think education and employers, we all can do better in bringing the world of work and the world of education more closely together. And I think that's what we're going to talk about in the panel now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a huge amount to think about there. And again, questions, cards will be coming around in a minute to put your questions down. I'd now like to invite our panel up to join us. So first of all, the Right Honourable Helen Clark, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand and first female head of the United Nations Development Programme, and has been passionate about the connections of the world of work with schools and development and progressive thinking around inclusion in New Zealand, and continues to support that agenda. Andria, and I'm going to struggle, Zafirako. Andria has a wonderful accolade in that the Varkey Foundation have a prize every year for the most accomplished and most innovative teacher in the world. And Andria won the prize last year. So we're going to hear from her also. And then last but not least, Nick Chambers, who is the Chief Executive of the Charity Education Employers, where I chair the trustees. So I'm going to start actually with asking each of you just for your thoughts and perspectives on what Andrea said. So Helen, do you want to go first? And then I'll ask Andrea to come in, just to give your observations on that and whether there's anything you violently disagree with or whether you think anything's understated.
Well, firstly, you can't be what you can't see is an incredibly important point to start the discussion. And in a way, perhaps it's always been thus. I'll give a personal story. When I was young, I always assumed I'd be a teacher because my mother was a teacher. And our parents very much shape our perceptions of what we will be. My dad was a farmer, but girls didn't go farming from my generation. That was something the boys did. That's changed now too. And I recall going to my careers advisor at my grammar school in New Zealand 3 consecutive years saying, I'd like to be a lawyer. What can you tell me about this? No one in my family had ever been a lawyer. And she gave me the same dusty leaflet from the Law Society each year. I never became a lawyer. Actually, I probably had a much more interesting life with what I did. But I think what the presentation stimulates us to think about is that now, not being what we can't see and don't have knowledge of, is even more challenging because of the very, very fast-moving world of work. When I was New Zealand Prime Minister, which is around a decade ago now, we used to say that 80% of today's 5-year-olds will be doing jobs that haven't yet been invented. So it's even beyond the imagination what we can be. So that your theme of linking the possibilities for the future and the world of work with the school, I think is very relevant.
And I think on that, since we're at the World Economic Forum, they published a piece of research last year, I think, and it estimated that 60% of primary school children today would go into jobs that didn't exist today. Yeah. So if you just think, I mean, whether that's 60, 50, it's still a huge number, isn't it? And I think plays to the agenda. So, Andrea.
I am the most optimistic person in the world, but I'm really worried. I'm really worried, and I say that as a teacher because what's lacking, what we need is our students to be more creative, it seems, and we can't do that in schools, or we're too frightened to do that in schools, or there's no time to do that in schools because there's other pressures, and it worries me that this is not an area that we really are saying, look, come on, let's just try and sort this out now, because this is what our children desperately need. And we have got reports out there that are saying it. I mean, we've heard it this morning, but still, no one seems to be taking this seriously in the world of education.
Thank you. Nick.
Yeah, just building on Andreas's points about the impact that role models can have. We've also done some other research that shows the impact of broadening horizons, raising aspirations, and motivating children. And if children get to meet people from the world of work, and they get to see why the subjects that they're studying are relevant, and they get excited about learning, then they work harder and they achieve more. And those stereotypes, particularly on gender, we did this last year, with 20,000, we proved that gender stereotyping starts in primaries and it's a global issue. And one simple way of challenging that is get people to spend an hour going into schools and just talking to children. It's quite simple.
Okay, I'm going to go straight into the questions to encourage others. So maybe I'll put this one to Andreas first of all. Can you speak about the intersection of education and the green economy?
Yeah, I think
as if we haven't had a big enough agenda. It's very relevant, but it adds to the agenda even more. Yes.
And I think that's, again, one of those issues of how we can make learning more relevant, how we can bring the world as we see it into the classroom and into the learning experience of children. And digitalization is actually a great tool to do this. You can actually now experience lots of things that you can't see. You can actually take an active role in those kinds of processes. And so, again, I think we do have the tools. The question is more, how can we find the space for this? And I think there's a lot we can do on the ground. I think the work that Nick is doing is just amazing, bringing people from real life into schools. But we also need to change the gateways in education. That's actually a quick win for governments. The kind of degrees and credentials that we award are sending very powerful messages to students and families, and even up to early childhood education. If we say, it's only about, mathematics and history that counts, other things are going to get squeezed out. So I think that's another layer where we really need to work on.
Okay, we have lots of employers in the room and lots will be on live stream as well. So I'm going to ask each of you a question that if you could design unlimited employer engagement into schools, what sorts of things would you like to see, assuming that everybody's willing to do everything? How would you shape that, and what would your programs look like? Andreas first.
Well, I would start with the question around curriculum design. Employers actually do a great work now on infrastructure, on support, but actually they're often not very much engaged into defining what students are learning well. This needs to become everybody's business. Shaping curricula, shaping assessments, shaping credentials. Again, university degrees are a great metric, but we need more micro-credentials. We need more and I think there's a lot that employers can do on that front as well.
Helen,
well, it's actually a complex question, because education isn't only about equipping us for the world of work. It's about equipping us for life, for being social beings, for participating. I was very interested that you brought the issue of voice and voting into the presentation as relevant to this discussion. Secondly, if I had a priority for education, it would be invest in our teachers, because who most influences us in these years? It's the inspirational teacher. Teachers are often poorly paid relative to others of the ability to do the job. So invest in them, their lifelong learning as well, because their ability to inspire children is critical. But then come to the employer interface. Firstly, I think the interaction with the schools is good, because it opens up ideas for the students about, well, what might I need to study if I want to do that? And there is, as you said, Andreas, a huge mismatch now between the demands of the labour market in the Western societies and often the skills that children have. I think also for the group that are very much at risk of being NEETs, but not in education, employment or training, the interface with the world of work quite early is very important, because these are young people who are not turned on by school terribly much, but the school environment is important, but some ability to interact with the kind of world of work they might go to can keep them focused in school as well. But as I say, complex, because yes, we have to work to live, but we don't want to live to work, as it were, and education must educate citizens too.
Andrea.
I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great if an organisation came to my school and said, can we come and have a look? Can we come for a walk around? Can we come and see what your students are like? Can we help? What is it you need? What is it? Oh, would you like to send a group of your students to our science labs? Oh, we can help you with this. It's almost like adopting a school, but to go into the local community and see what is there, because I think that's when the work industry and the educationers can really work together to say, actually, this is, you need to be training your students to be doing this, to be doing that, because that's what we need in our industry. So I think the word is collaboration, and not to be frightened to cross the threshold of going back into a school. And I love the point which you said about teachers, because I think it's great we're entering this really exciting technology world, but who's going to train the teachers to use it? What time do I have to do that? I'm sorry, I'm teaching 5 out of 5. I haven't got the time. I've got a mark. I've got to do this, and you really want me to embed it, into my lessons? Forget it. So it's all about thinking, how can we implement this brilliantly, well, and without devaluing the quality of the teaching profession.
Okay, Nick.
Yeah, I'd like to build on it. I mean, I think it's collaboration, it's also partnership, and with any partnership, there's got to be mutual benefit. And I think employers have got to benefit and schools have got to benefit, and it's got to be one of mutuality. And if that, it's not going to work otherwise. And you've articulated brilliantly some of the advantages to your school. And for employers, in terms of staff motivation, in terms of the future workforce, in terms of community reputation, in terms of actually having motivated staff, because you are a company that cares and supports its staff to do volunteering, or because you care about gender or the environment and you're going into schools to talk about that. I think that's really important. Our title, you'll see, is Education and Employers. It's not Education and Business. And we think it's a really important distinction. Because we see employers as meaning, obviously, businesses, the corporate sector, but we also mean employers in the health service or in universities or in government. People in employment, whether they are, a one-person artist. I would see them as, or maybe two, small craftspeople. They're all employers. So I think, employers is a term which is more powerful than businesses. Finally, this thing about NEETs. We did a study about 4 years ago where we proved that children who had 4 or more encounters with employers, even maybe just an hour or two with them, it reduced their chances of being NEET by 23%. I think that's quoted in a number of government's policy. And why? Because people get to see what they might be, and then they're just, because it's so confusing for young people, the world of work, so confusing. And like adults, we get confused with technology or how to use your phone or how to use your phone to pay, and it sounds very complicated. When someone shows you, you think it's really simple. If someone doesn't show you, it's not simple. And for those kids who can't meet people, they sit there and they don't know what to do, so they don't do anything. Just like us, when we face with something that's a bit difficult, think, I'll put that off. Kids put it off, and by the time they finish, they're NEET. So I think there's also a link there with NEETs.
Let me move on a little bit to another area. I want to come back to influencing at primary school, but a question about gender stereotyping and the issues that creates when we have a world which is going to need lots of digital skills and a STEM base for many school students. My colleague Sharon Thorne and I were with the chairman of a major group, not from the UK, but I'm not going to embarrass the country by naming it, but from another European country this morning, who said it was a massive issue in his country because girls at school just didn't fancy doing STEM subjects. And he said they've still not managed to break that issue, and he personally is taking a lead on that in his country. And I think in many countries it's not an issue, but in some countries it's still a big issue. So can I just ask, and anybody can go first on this really, how we deal with some of the gender stereotyping around the jobs and roles that you described earlier, Andreas? So whoever wants to go first.
First of all, to say that those differences, these gender stereotypes emerge very early. You can see, I mean, school has done a quite great job in getting, boys and girls doing similarly well on science in outcomes. But when you look at the aspirations, now do young people believe that science is going to open life opportunities? That's where you see the kind of social emotional attachment. That's where the focus needs to be. And it's not just an issue of schools. As parents, we're part of the problem sometimes as well. I can give you an example. When you have a boy and a girl with the same science score, same achievement level, parents are 3 times more likely to expect their son to become the engineer than their daughter. And the children know that. The children, when you ask the children, that's basically in their mindset as well. So I think this is, again, showing role models early on in the earliest years, basically giving children exposure to science. Science is not about equations and formulas on a board. It's about understanding how things work, about nature. There's so much that we can do to address those gender stereotypes. And it's not about academic achievement. That's where schools have more or less solved that problem.
Well, I had a very interesting conversation on this with the Dean of Engineering at Auckland University faculty last year, and he's set a target by 2020 to get 30% of the engineering school enrolment as women, and it's going to be quite challenging because historically it's been low. But the insight he offered from the kind of surveying they were doing was that, and I don't want to generalise because not every woman may identify with this, but that women tend to be rather human-centred. And so the profession of engineering, women might say, well, how's that going to relate to what I would like to do for humanity? And they often see it as, well, it's a road, it's a bridge, it's ICT, it's electrical engineering, but they want engineering profiled in a way which has a human element to it. Now, one crusty old engineer I spoke to said, "You'll never get that," but actually you can show the utility of the profession to human development and progress. So I think also the world of work, the professionals in these areas need to be thinking about how they present themselves and the object and purpose and function of the work as well.
I've just automatically looked back and thought about my staff cohort. We have 114 teachers in my school, teachers, not support teachers. And if I was to look at who they are completely diverse. We have female staff in hijabs teaching science. They are the role models for our girls. We have ICT teachers who are women and who they are the role model for our girls. We have girls who are graduating in dentistry, who are graduating in law. So I do think it's going back to what are we doing in our schools and who are we exposing our students to. If you've got educators there who are automatically the students can identify to as being role models, then that's a really quick win. And that is, again, teachers and the school's responsibility to make sure they recruit. But again, on the other hand, I do think it is who our children have got that time and exposure to. So by bringing in dentists, females into schools who have got great professions or other professions, who students can just also question. So what's it like? What journey did you do? How did you do it? What did you do? What did your parents say to you when you said that? Because my parents will say this: having that conversation is powerful. That's what changes the lives of children. That's very small conversation. We can have speakers coming into schools and just talking about their journey. That's great. But if you want to change a life and you want to inspire a child, you have and give that opportunity for them to have a conversation one-to-one. And that's how you make it happen.
Well put. Very good. Very powerful. Nick?
It's really hard to sort of say anything beyond that. I think, you know, we back in the UK, we run the Primary Futures programme where we have so far 50,000 people volunteering. We've got 4,000 schools already doing that. We'll go on for a minute to what we did here yesterday in Davos. And those conversations where children ask the adults questions that are interesting to them. You know, no one telling them things, they're inquisitive. There was a question about green technology. Well, you know, if kids were excited about windmills or wind turbines or, you know, and getting power from the sea or solar panel or how we could be more environmentally sustainable by using technology, then that would excite. Healthcare, you know, all those things. It's engineering in all those sort of things. Now, you know, that would really excite people. I think you're absolutely right. You know, you've got to start young. And there's some great research from the Aspires team at the IOE in London, which has looked at this, and it's saying that from, you know, girls from 8 and 9, if they switch off from science because they don't relate it, they think that someone wears a white coat and glasses, you know, and they work with sort of mechanical things, they switch off, and once they switch off, you know, if you can't go to them at 14 and say, now be interested in science, you lose them. So, you know, you've got to keep them excited and motivated about learning and why learning is important at that young age.
Okay, thank you. And we're getting towards the final stretch. So if anybody's got any final questions they'd like to ask, please write them down on a bit of paper and we'll pick them up. I just want to introduce one other topic, and that is around primary schools. And there is a challenge sometimes. Is it too young to talk to children about what they want to do? And some people's biases are that it is, and it should only be secondary schools. But I think as some of the research has shown, and Andreas' paper today has shown, I think you do need to get to children very young. And yesterday, a group of delegates from the World Economic Forum, including some World Economic Forum's own employees, including some employees from Deloitte and other places as well, visited the local Davos primary school to talk to the children. And I'm delighted to welcome Martin Flisk here, who's the head teacher of the primary school. And I just want Martin to say just a few words about the impact on the children. I don't know what he's going to say, so he may say it's terrible, but hopefully he'll say some good things, interesting things anyway, but also lessons learned from it, because I think there was quite a big group of people who went into the school to talk about what they did, and some of those one-to-one conversations you were talking about, how did you get there, what did you do, and so on. So Martin, welcome, and thank you for coming. If you want to go there.
Yeah, we had 4 months ago, we had a question from Andria, and she asked me, can we make some drawings from the children about their job dreams? And I say, oh, okay, it's good, we will do it. And I asked my teachers, and the teachers say, okay, we will do it. And so we sent these drawings to Andrea and also to Nick. And then we have received the results from this from the drawings, and I was very surprised about these results, because I think that our children have a lot of choose from the jobs, but that's not correct. They have choose only small, only 4 or 5 jobs, and also here in Davos, we are nearby the nature. The children like to be skier, for example, or football player, maybe also, but not in the winter. And we have also from the girls, there was 61% who like, no, the boys were 61% who like to be sportsmen, and children and the girls, there was about 14% who like to be teacher, and maybe we have good teachers, so they like to be teacher. Maybe I don't know. And then yesterday we have the possibility to be together with Nick, with Andrea, with Andreas, and also with other participant of the WEF, and the teacher and the participant speaks with the children, and the children asked, what have I do to be a director, what have I do to be another profession, and it was very, very good, this discussion. And we had the children from 8 to 12 years, and the children from 8 years asked very, very good questions. And so I think it's very important to ask the children not in 12 or 14 years. We have to ask there by 8, by 9, by 10 years what they will do. And it's also interesting for us to say to the children, you have to look out from your family, you have to look what are other possibility to learn for a profession. And for me it's very, very important. The children must have information, and the children must have education. That's very important, so they can choose a good job for her life. And this event yesterday was very, very good. For me, I have to say yesterday I like to make another session, maybe next year, maybe in 4 years, I don't know. But for our school, it's very, very interesting, and it's very interesting also for the children. Thank you for coming to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Okay, I've got a final couple of questions here, which are really, really interesting. One is specifically for you, Andreas, and it's about the competition for time on curriculums between governments wanting to be more prescriptive about what the curriculum should look like, and that taking up a lot of time. And is there time left over to talk about all the things that we've been talking about today and to get employees into school, or is there such a squeeze that it's impossible, and how do we reconcile that?
It's a very good question. You know, the simple truth is that the highest performing education system teach fewer things at greater depths. They teach you, again, how to think like an historian, how to think like a scientist, and then, you're on your own. You can actually develop this, and I think we have crowded out the space for teachers with very prescriptive ways of education that actually lead to very shallow knowledge among students. The surprising thing is when you give students a task that is slightly different than what they learn, they fail, because they have not learned the foundations of the academic discipline. So the key to success really is, and that's what we see in the highest performing education systems, teaching fewer things at greater depth. It takes a lot of courage, because actually it's very easy to add things to the curriculum. Every day comes a new idea. One day it's environmental literacy, then it's financial literacy, then digital literacy. Every time comes something in addition. But we end up teaching young people the technologies of our times to actually deal with their problems in the future. So radical reduction of the curriculum. And some countries have done it. Japan took out 30% of its school curriculum. That was an amazing kind of move. And it's been something that was heavily contested, but it ultimately led Japan to becoming one of the countries with the steepest rise in creative thinking, because teachers suddenly had the space to give students more exposure to problems at depth. So I think that's the simple answer to this. It's not about adding more things. It's about teaching really the foundations.
Thank you, Andreas. And the final question, a sort of bigger philosophical question for all of you, really. It's and with all that we've heard about in the presentation earlier from Andreas, is how do we instill an appreciation of the benefits of diverse thinking into young people at schools? So it's a very big question, not an easy one. So I'll open it up. Whoever wants to tackle it first, on you go.
Isn't it a link to creating an awareness of how fast the world is changing?
Yeah.
And so very early specialisation may lead you down a track which isn't going to provide a future for you. So education is always opening up possibilities. The importance of the thinking and creativity skills. That's the direction I'd take it in.
Well, actually, this year, in this year's PISA assessment, we are going to talk about global competency, and this is exactly about, are students aware, do they appreciate different ways of thinking, different ways of working, learn to live with people who come from different cultural backgrounds. And this is one aspect of diversity. The other aspect of diversity is equally important, and that is, can students think across the boundaries of the curriculum? Can they look at problems through multiple disciplinary lenses? So I think diversity on every dimension is the key to the future, and it is something that in the next in this PISA assessment we've put a lot of attention to.
Interesting. So Andrew, from the front line.
Well, no, and as a result of that, because I think you're both absolutely right, is also to stop categorising students. If that just because you don't fit that box, you have to fit that box. Or how about if I want to do, or I fit both boxes? So it's, I don't know how, but we need to stop thinking about this is the road for you. Well, actually, how why can't they have a bit of both? And again, it's thinking about that diversity as well.
Nick, do you want to comment?
Yeah, very true. But I think obviously the teaching is central. I used to be a teacher, and I followed my dad, who was also a teacher. So, at the heart of it is teaching, and you're going nowhere without that. Our bit and our charity bit is trying to get people to go into schools and talk to people. And I don't think, certainly in the UK and other countries I know are taking this on, I don't think any of our young people should grow up not having a chance to meet people. I don't, if you come from a poor background, that shouldn't just limit who you meet, because you meet your parents, the friends of parents, and the people in that narrow community. The chance to actually meet people who do a range of jobs. So every young person should have the chance at an early age to meet a diverse range of people, people from different backgrounds, different faiths, people doing different jobs, because then you show that diversity to young people, and at an early age before people get preconceptions.
So on that positive note and call to action, I will call things to a conclusion. I'd just like to thank Andreas hugely and the panel hugely for dealing with the questions and for the report, Andreas, and I hope you all enjoy reading the report, which is online now. I'd like to thank the audience here in Davos for coming along and being enthusiastic supporters. I really appreciate that, and thank you all to those of you who've got this far online listening to the recording. I hope you found some things of use in it, and it stimulated some thinking for you too. So on that note, I'll call things to a conclusion, and thank you all. Thank you.